Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning we'll be in Ruth chapter 2, verse 1 through chapter 4, verse 22. Now, Naomi had a relative on her husband's side of the family named Boaz. He was a wealthy, prominent man from the clan of Elimelech. One day, Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the fields so I can gather grain behind whoever permits me to do so." Naomi replied, "You may go, my daughter." So Ruth went and gathered in the fields behind the harvesters. Now she just happened to end up in the portion of the field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. Now at that very moment Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. "May the Lord be with you." They replied, "May the Lord bless you." Boaz asked his servant in charge of the harvesters, "To whom does this young woman belong?" The servant in charge of the harvesters replied, "She's the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the region of Moab." She asked, "May I follow the harvesters and gather grain among the bundles?" Since she arrived, she has been working hard from this morning until now, except for sitting in the resting hut for a short time. So Boaz said to Ruth, "Listen carefully, my dear. Do not leave to gather grain in another field. You need not go beyond the limits of this field. You may go along beside my female workers. Take note of the field where the men are harvesting and follow behind with the female workers. I will tell the men to leave you alone. When you are thirsty, you may go to the water jars and drink some of the water the servants draw." Ruth knelt before him with her forehead to the ground and said to him, "Why are you so kind and so attentive to me, even though I am a foreigner?" Boaz replied to her, "I have been given a full report of all that you have done for your mother-in-law in following the death of your husband, how you left your father and your mother, as well as your homeland, and came to live among people you did not know previously. May the Lord reward your efforts. May your acts of kindness be repaid fully by the Lord God of Israel, from whom you have sought protection." She said, "You really are being kind to me, sir, for you have reassured and encouraged me, your servant, even though I am not one of your servants." Later, during the mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come here and have some food. Dip your bread in the vinegar." So she sat down beside the harvesters. Then he handed her some roasted grain. She ate until she was full and saved the rest. When she got up to gather grain, Boaz told his male servants, "Let her gather grain, even among the bundles. Don't chase her off. Make sure you pull out ears of grain for her and drop them so she can gather them up. Don't tell her not to." So she gathered grain in the field until evening. When she threshed what she had gathered, it came to about 30 pounds of barley. She carried it back to town, and her mother-in-law saw how much grain she had gathered. Then Ruth gave her the roasted grain she had saved for mealtime. Her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you gather grain today? Where did you work? May the one who took notice of you be rewarded." So Ruth told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked. She said, "The name of the man with whom I worked today is Boaz." Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be rewarded by the Lord because he has shown loyalty to the living on behalf of the dead." Then Naomi said to her, "This man is a close relative of ours. He is our guardian." Ruth the Moabite replied, "He even told me, 'You may go along beside my servants until they have finished gathering all my harvest.'" Naomi then said to her daughter-in-law Ruth, "It is good, my daughter, that you should go out to work with his female servants. That way you will not be harmed, which could happen in another field." So Ruth worked beside Boaz's female servants, gathering grain until the end of the barley harvest, as well as the wheat harvest. After that, she stayed home with her mother-in-law. At that time, Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, I must find a home for you so you will be secure. Now Boaz, with whose female servants you worked, is our close relative. Look, tonight he is winnowing barley at the threshing floor. So bathe yourself, rub on some perfumed oil, and get dressed up. Then go down to the threshing floor. But don't let the man know you're there until he finishes his meal. When he gets ready to go to sleep, take careful notice of the place where he lies down. Then go, uncover his legs, and lie down beside him. He will tell you what you should do." Ruth replied to Naomi, "I will do everything you have told me to do." So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law had instructed her to do. When Boaz had finished his meal and was feeling satisfied, he lay down to sleep at the far end of the grain heap. Then Ruth crept up quietly, uncovered his legs, and lay down beside him. In the middle of the night he was startled and turned over. Now he saw a woman lying beside him. He said, "Who are you?" She replied, "I am Ruth, your servant. Marry your servant, for you are a guardian of the family interests." He said, "May you be rewarded by the Lord, my dear. This act of devotion is greater than what you did before, for you have not sought to marry one of the young men, whether rich or poor. Now, my dear, don't worry. I intend to do for you everything you propose, for everyone in the village knows that you are a worthy woman. Now, yes, it is true that I am a guardian, but there is another guardian who is a closer relative than I am. Remain here tonight. Then in the morning, if he agrees to marry you, fine, let him do so. But if he does not want to do so, I promise as surely as the Lord lives to marry you. Sleep here until morning." So she slept beside him until morning. She woke up while it was still dark. Boaz thought no one must know that a woman visited the threshing floor. Then he said, "Hold out your shawl you are wearing and grip it tightly." As she held it tightly, he measured out about 60 pounds of barley into the shawl and put it on her shoulders. Then he went into town. And she returned to her mother-in-law. When Ruth returned to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, "How did things turn out for you, my daughter?" Ruth told her about all the man had done for her. She said, "He gave me these 60 pounds of barley, for he said to me, 'Do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" Then Naomi said, "Stay put, my daughter, until you know how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest until he has taken care of the matter today." Now Boaz went up to the village gate and sat there. And then along came the guardian whom Boaz had mentioned to Ruth. Boaz said, "Come here and sit down, John Doe." So he came and sat down. Boaz chose 10 of the village leaders and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. Then Boaz said to the guardian, "Naomi, who has returned from the region of Moab, is selling the portion of land that belongs to our relative Elimelech. So I am legally informing you. Acquire it before those sitting here and before the leaders of my people. If you want to exercise your right to redeem it, then do so. But if not, then tell me, so I will know. For you possess the first option to redeem it. I am next in line after you." He replied, "I will redeem it." Then Boaz said, "When you acquire the field from Naomi, you must also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the wife of our deceased relative, in order to preserve his family name by raising up a descendant who will inherit his property." The guardian said, "Then I am unable to redeem it, for I would ruin my own inheritance in that case. You may exercise my redemption option, for I am unable to redeem it." Now this used to be the customary way to finalize a transaction involving redemption in Israel. A man would remove his sandal and give it to the other party. This was a legally binding act in Israel. So the guardian said to Boaz, "You may acquire it," and he removed his sandal. Then Boaz said to the leaders and all the people, "You are witnesses today that I have acquired from Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Mahlon, as my wife to raise up a descendant who will inherit his property, so the name of the deceased might not disappear from among his relatives and from his village. You are witnesses today." All the people who were at the gate and the elders replied, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is entering your home like Rachel and Leah, both of whom built up the houses of Israel. May you prosper in Ephrath and become famous in Bethlehem. May your family become like the family of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, through the descendants the Lord gives you by this young woman." So Boaz married Ruth and had sexual relations with her. The Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The village women said to Naomi, "May the Lord be praised, because he has not left you without a guardian today. May he become famous in Israel. He will encourage you and provide for you when you are old. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, has given him birth. She is better to you than 7 sons." Naomi took the child and placed him on her lap. She became his caregiver. The neighbor women named him, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." They named him Obed. Now he became the father of Jesse, David's father. These are the descendants of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron was the father of Ram. Ram was the father of Amminadab. Amminadab was the father of Nahshon. Nahshon was the father of Salmon. Salmon was the father of Boaz. Boaz was the father of Obed. Obed was the father of Jesse. And Jesse was the father of David. Yeah, so you have the rest of the story of Ruth here. Where now that they are in Israel, Ruth and Naomi need to not starve. So Ruth goes out into the fields to gather grain for her and her mother-in-law. And as she does so, she just so happens to be gathering in the field of Boaz here, who is her kinsman redeemer, though not the closest one. This concept of a kinsman redeemer being that if a man should die, his brother should marry the widow, essentially to raise up children for his brother. That way the inheritance can be passed on through this family line. So she goes into the field of Boaz and harvests there, and she's noticed by Boaz, and favor is bestowed upon her. And it's because of the loyal love that she showed to her mother-in-law here that such attention is being shown to her. And it's interesting that that news about her has spread so thoroughly throughout the village. Yeah, and then after that, Naomi decides that she needs to find a home for her daughter-in-law here. That is, a man for her to get married to. And she decides that Boaz is the best bet and advises her to go to Boaz. And Boaz agrees and greets the other kinsman redeemer and enters into a legally binding contract with him to take the field and Ruth as his wife. And in the end, Naomi is blessed, despite the previous misfortune that befell her. From Guzik here. Naomi was related to this man Boaz through her deceased husband, Elimelech. We don't know exactly how he was related, but he was. A man of great wealth. During the time of famine, when Elimelech, Naomi, and their whole family had left the promised land and went to Moab, Boaz had stayed behind, and God provided for him. In fact, God made Boaz a man of great wealth. 10 years before, Naomi and her family made a choice, and it was a choice made in a hard time, a time of famine. But they didn't have to make the wrong choice they did. The people of Bethlehem had not perished from hunger. They were still there, and they were blessed more than Naomi's family. Sometimes we justify wrong choices because of difficult circumstances, but God will strengthen us and bless us to make the right choice, even in difficult circumstances. The exact expression rendered a mighty man of wealth is elsewhere translated a mighty man of valor. We perhaps get the force of it by thinking of the word knight. A kinsman. This introduces an important word in the book of Ruth, the ancient Hebrew word goel. To say that Boaz was a goel, a kinsman, was more than saying he was a relative. It was saying that he was a special family representative. He was a chieftain in the family. Please let me go to the field and glean heads of grain. Leviticus 19:9-10 commanded farmers in Israel that they should not completely harvest their fields. They were commanded to cut corners in harvesting, and always leave some behind. Also, if they happened to drop a bundle of grain, they were commanded to leave it on the ground and to not pick it up. This was one of the social assistance programs in Israel. Farmers were not to completely harvest their fields, so the poor and needy could come and glean the remains for themselves. This is a wonderful way of helping the poor. It commanded the farmers to have a generous heart, and it commanded the poor to be active and work for their food. and a way for them to provide for their own needs with dignity. Then she left, so Ruth, on her own initiative, set out to glean in the fields to support her and her mother-in-law Naomi. This showed a wonderfully hard-working spirit in Ruth, and it was spiritual also. She would not have been more spiritual to sit back home and pray for food. She happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz. It says that Ruth happened to come to that place, and certainly that is how it seemed to her. But it was not actually how it came to pass. Ruth came to that field because God was guiding her. This shows us some of the wonderful ways that the invisible hand of God works. If Ruth would have stayed home and waited for a spiritual feeling, she probably might have waited a long time, and still probably would have gone to the wrong field. Instead, Ruth experienced the very natural moving of the supernatural hand of God. Many times, when we are really walking in the Spirit, we can only see the invisible hand of God by looking back. If we spend too much time trying to look for His hand ahead of us, we can make problems for ourselves. The Lord be with you. This shows us something of the heart and character of Boaz. Apparently, his workers loved him and had a good relationship with him. You can often tell the real character of a man in authority by seeing how he relates to his staff and how they think of him. And she said, "Please let me glean and gather." As the supervisor reported to Boaz, he told of Ruth's submissive attitude. There is a sense in which the gleaning was hers by right. After all, she could have quoted Leviticus 19:9-10 back at him, but she kindly and properly asked for the right to gather in his field. So she came and has continued from morning until now. Ruth may not have known it, but she was under inspection. The supervisor was looking at what kind of job she did, and he was impressed that she did a good job. And the fact that she did a good job was important, because it made a good impression on Boaz. We are under inspection also. At times when we don't know it, we are being watched by others to see how we will walk with God, and what they see will make a difference. "Stay close by, my young women." These were Boaz's female field workers, who tied together the cut stalks of grain. Boaz told Ruth to stay close to them, so she would be well taken care of. Do not go to glean in another field. God was blessing Ruth already, and all because he guided her to Boaz's field. Boaz knew that if Ruth stayed in his fields, she would be blessed and find in Boaz's field, Ruth would find companionship, protection, refreshment, and the kindness of Boaz was wonderful. At this time, we have no indication of a romantic attraction between Boaz and Ruth, and we have no idea how Ruth looked. Even if she was pretty, she was probably pretty ragged from a whole day of hard work. Yet Boaz extended this kindness to her. We find it pretty easy to be kind to others when we can see a potential payoff from the investment of our kindness. Yet true kindness is shown when we extend ourselves to others who, as far as we can see, have nothing to give us. "Why have I found favor in your eyes?" Ruth's attitude was wonderful. Some of us would have said, "Well, it's about time someone noticed. I've been working hard all day. Now God will give me the blessings that I deserve." We never see Ruth asking why all the hard things have come upon her in life. Instead, she asks why this good thing has come. This is a significant difference in attitude. Since I am a foreigner, this was constantly on Ruth's mind. She was a Moabite and not an Israelite. She knew that on the basis of national background, she didn't belong. This made Boaz's kindness to her all the more precious. The Bible says that we should be kind to the strangers among us, but this also applies on another level. Since our society is no longer structured around the family, for many people, their most important circle of association is their friends. Sociologists call this tribalization. We become a part of a little tribe, a little circle of friends. The command to love the stranger means that we should not only associate with those of our own tribe, and that we should always welcome those outside of our tribe. It has been reported to me, this is a dynamic of small-town life. Everybody knows everybody else's business, yet it also shows that Ruth's devotion to Naomi mattered. It was noticed. "The Lord repay your work, and a full reward be given to you by the Lord God of Israel." Fittingly, Boaz encouraged Ruth as if she were a new convert to the God of Israel. In many ways, Ruth stands as an example of a new convert. In the same way, older Christians should be like Boaz unto younger Christians who are like Ruth. Observe that he saluted her with words of tender encouragement. For this is precisely what I want all the elder Christians among you to do to those who are the counterparts of Ruth. I want you to make a point of looking at the young converts and speaking to them godly words, and comfortable words, whereby they may be cheered and strengthened. From Spurgeon. Significantly, though these words were said to Ruth, they were also a prayer unto God for Ruth. Christians should pray for one another, especially older Christians should pray for new converts. The Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge. Boaz especially knew of Ruth's commitment to the God of Israel. This was his way of showing kindness and encouragement to a young believer in the Lord. Let me find favor in your sight. This was a very polite way of saying thank you to Boaz. Ruth was almost overwhelmed by his kindness and was polite enough to say thank you. Dip your bread in the vinegar. Perhaps now we see the first hint of romance. Boaz showed great kindness and favor to Ruth at mealtime. It would be enough to have just invited her, but he also invited her to share fully in the meal, even the privileged dipping. She ate and was satisfied, and kept some back. Ruth also may be awakening to some romance toward Boaz. She kept some back. She did not eat all that was offered to her, meaning that she didn't want to seem like a greedy eater in front of Boaz, and she was sensible enough to take some home to Naomi. Let her glean even among the sheaves. This was more generous than the command in Leviticus 19, 9-10. Boaz would allow Ruth to take some from among the already gathered sheaves of grain. Let some grain from the bundles fall purposely for her. This was also beautiful. Boaz wanted to bless Ruth, but he didn't want to dishonor her dignity by making her a charity case. So he allowed some grain to fall, supposedly by accident, so that she could pick it up. She gleaned in the field until evening and beat out what she had gleaned. Yes, God blessed Ruth. Yes, people were generous to her. Yes, at the same time, she did work hard. This was a sun-up to sundown day, and Ruth worked hard all day long. It was about an ephah of barley. This was about a 5 1/2 gallon tub of barley. A wonderful day's work to people who had nothing. Blessed be the name of the Lord, who has not forsaken his kindness to the living and the dead. Is this the same woman who came into town saying, "Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me"? Is this the same woman who said, "The Almighty has afflicted me"? Of course it is. Now she sees more of God's plan unfolding, so she can see better how all things are working together for good for those who love God. It is good, my daughter. Of course, Naomi told Ruth, "Stay with this man Boaz." Not only was he generous, he was one of our near kinsmen, the importance of which will be unfolded in the coming chapters. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said, the time of the harvest was over, and certainly Ruth and Boaz had been around each other much in the weeks covering the barley and the wheat harvest. They had much opportunity to get to know each other. However, according to the customs of the day, we can't say that Ruth and Boaz were dating in the way we think of dating in our modern culture. They were not paired off as a couple with one-on-one time with each other. Rather, they spent their time together in the context of a group, the men and women who worked for Boaz in the harvest. From God's perspective, there is much in the dating game that works against forming healthy, lasting relationships. For many people, dating means the continual making and breaking of casual, romantic relationships, patterns that teach us more how to end relationships than how to make them last. Additionally, dating can be a relatively superficial way to get to know someone. Each person in a dating relationship tends to put on a mask for the other. For example, many women have been deceived into thinking a man is good and nice because he is nice to them in a dating relationship. Of course he is. Often he's nice because he wants something in that dating relationship. A better gauge to measure the man or the woman is to see how they act towards others in a group setting, because sooner or later, that is how they are going to treat you. So over the period of the harvest, Ruth and Boaz got to know each other pretty well by seeing what kind of people the other was around a larger group. Shall I not seek security for you? Naomi knew that Ruth could best be taken care of if she was married, so she suggested that she appeal to Boaz for marriage. So, now Boaz is our relative. One might easily think that this was inappropriately forward of Naomi to suggest this to Ruth. It is possible to think that Naomi plotted with Ruth to make her a man trap, to go out and hunt down a reluctant Boaz for marriage. Not at all. Naomi's suggestion to Ruth was rooted in a peculiar custom in ancient Israel, the meaning behind the word goel. The goel, sometimes translated kinsman redeemer, had a specifically defined role in Israel's family life. The kinsman redeemer was responsible to buy a fellow Israelite out of slavery. He was responsible to be the avenger of blood, to make sure the murderer of a family member answered to the crime. He was responsible to buy back family land that had been forfeited. He was responsible to carry on the family name by marrying a childless widow. In this we see that the goel, the kinsman redeemer, was responsible to safeguard the persons, the property, and the prosperity of the family. Words from the root goel are used with a variety of meaning in the Old Testament, but the fundamental idea is that of fulfilling one's obligations as a kinsman. Is he not our relative? Since Boaz was a recognized goel for the family of Elimelech, the deceased husband of Naomi and father-in-law of Ruth, Ruth could appeal to him to safeguard the posterity of Elimelech's family and take her in marriage. It may seem forward to us, but it was regarded as proper in that day. Therefore, wash yourself, uncover his feet, and lie down. At the appropriate time, Naomi instructs Ruth to go in, uncover his feet, and lie down. Some might think this was a provocative gesture, as if Ruth was told to provocatively offer herself sexually to Boaz. This was not how the gesture was understood in that day. In the culture of that day, this was understood as an act of total submission. In that day, this was understood to be the role of a servant, to lay at their master's feet and be ready for any command of the master. So when Naomi told Ruth to lie down at Boaz's feet, she told her to come to him in a totally humble and submissive way. Don't lose sight of the larger picture. Ruth came to claim her right. Boaz was her goel, her kinsman redeemer, and she had the right to expect him to marry her and raise up a family to perpetuate the name of Elimelech. But Naomi wisely counseled Ruth to not come as a victim demanding her rights, but as a humble servant, trusting in the goodness of her kinsman redeemer. She said to Boaz, I respect you, I trust you, and I put my fate in your hands. And Boaz went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. There was a good reason why Boaz slept at the threshing floor. These were the days of the judges, when there was much political and social instability in Israel. It wasn't unusual for gangs of thieves to come and steal all the hard-earned grain a farmer had grown. Boaz slept at the threshing floor to guard his crop against the kind of attacks described in 1 Samuel 23. And it happened at midnight that the man was startled. This was an amazing scene. We can well imagine that Boaz was indeed startled, waking up in the night as he turned in his sleep, knowing that someone was out there, but not being able to see clearly because of the darkness and the sleep in his eyes. Since Boaz had been there to protect against thieves, it must have given him quite a shock to wake up and know someone was there. But his shock quickly turned to wondering when he found out the visitor was a woman. Take your maidservant under your wing, for you are a close relative. Ruth identified herself and made a simple request. In beginning with the words, take your maidservant, Ruth again showed great humility and submission. She presented herself as Boaz's servant. Under your wing. Here, she boldly asked Boaz to take her in marriage. The phrase can also be translated as spread the corner of your garment over me. This was a culturally relevant way to say, I am a widow, take me as your wife. For you are a close relative. This shows that this was not an inappropriate thing for Ruth to do toward Boaz. It was bold, but not inappropriate. Ruth understood this as she identified Boaz as her close relative. Literally, you are a goel, a kinsman redeemer. Blessed are you of the Lord, my daughter. You did not go after young men. Apparently, there was a considerable age difference between Ruth and Boaz. It also seems that because of this, Boaz considered himself unattractive to Ruth, and had therefore ruled out any idea of a romance between them. This shows something else wonderful about Boaz. He had the right to force himself upon Ruth as her goel, but he did not. He wasn't just going to say, there was a woman I want, and I have her by right. He was kind enough to not act as Goel toward Ruth unless she desired it. It also shows something wonderful about Ruth. She based her attraction to Boaz more on respect than on image or appearance. Tragically, many people fall in love with an image or an appearance rather than with a person we can really respect. I will do for you all that you request. Boaz made Naomi look brilliant in her advice to Ruth. The plan worked perfectly. All the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman. Boaz was also attracted to Ruth because of her character. We don't really know how Ruth looked, but we do know that she was a woman of godly character. And he measured 6 ephahs of barley. As a proper gentleman, Boaz did not send Ruth home empty-handed. Not having any chocolates, he gave her 6 handfuls of grain. The added word ephahs is almost certainly incorrect. That would be more than 33 gallons of grain, more than Ruth could carry home in her shawl. Sit still, my daughter. The man will not rest until he has concluded the matter this day. This was a time of considerable anxiety for Ruth. She had claimed her right to marriage and would be married. The only question was, to whom would she be married? Would it be to Boaz or to the nearer Goel? The issue would be decided that very day. Now Boaz went. The previous chapter left us at a dramatic point. Ruth and Boaz were obviously in love and wanted to get married, with Boaz exercising the right of the Goel, the kinsman redeemer. Yet there was a kinsman closer to Ruth, and he had priority. Would he claim the right? Boaz went up to the gate. The gate of the city was always the place where the esteemed and honorable men of the city sat. For an ancient city in Israel, it was a combination of a city council chamber and a courtroom. The close relative of whom Boaz had spoken came by. Boaz surprised Ruth in Ruth 3:12 by telling her that there was a nearer kinsman than himself. Now this man came to the city gate as Boaz sat there. Because Ruth had quietly gone back home after being at the threshing floor at Boaz's instructions, Boaz's approach to this nearer kinsman was planned as a complete surprise to the other man. Clearly, this was a tactical advantage to Boaz. Come aside, friend, sit down here. Literally, in the ancient Hebrew, when Boaz greeted the nearer kinsman, he called him Mr. So-and-so. The writer of Ruth never identified the name of the nearer kinsman because he was not worthy of the honor. He declined to fulfill his obligations as the nearer kinsman to Ruth. Denying being the kinsman redeemer was, at least according to the Levitical law, a black mark upon this person's name. I think it even said that they were to spit in his face. Doubtless, Boaz both knew his name and called him by it, but it is omitted by the holy writer, partly because it was unnecessary to know it, and principally in way of contempt, as is usual, and a just punishment upon him, that he would not preserve his brother's name, might lose his own, and lie buried in the grave of perpetual oblivion. Naomi sold the piece of land. The duty of the Goel, the kinsman redeemer, was more than the duty to preserve the family name of his brother in Israel. It was also to keep land allotted to the members of the clan within the clan. When Israel came into the Promised Land during the days of Joshua, the land was divided among the tribes and then among the family groups. God intended that the land stay within those tribes and family groups, so the land could never be permanently sold. Every 50 years, it had to be returned to the original family group. But 50 years is a long time, so God made provision for the land that was sold, that it might be redeemed back to the family by the kinsman redeemer. The piece of land. When Boaz brought the matter up to the nearer kinsman, he brought it up as a matter regarding property, something any man would be interested in. Anyone would want to buy back a piece of property and keep it in the family name by keeping it for oneself. If you will redeem it, redeem it. When Boaz put it in terms of it purely a land transaction, there was no hesitation on the nearer kinsman's part. Of course, he said, I will redeem it. Certainly Ruth and Naomi were watching and listening. How their hearts must have sunk when they heard the nearer kinsman say, I will redeem it. They heard from his own lips that he would exercise his right as kinsman redeemer, and that meant that he would gain not only the property in question, but also marry Ruth, instead of Boaz. But Boaz knew exactly what he was doing, and he had the situation under control. On the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also buy it from Ruth the Moabitess. Boaz then put the surprise on the nearer kinsman. He told him that he wasn't only dealing with Naomi and the property of Elimelech, he also had to deal with Ruth. Because Naomi was older and beyond the years of bearing children, the nearer kinsman was not expected to marry Naomi and raise up children to the family name of her deceased husband Elimelech. But Ruth was another matter. She was able to marry and bear children. Buy it from Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance. Boaz explained what everyone knew, that this was a package deal. If someone was going to exercise the right of kinsman redeemer toward the deceased Elimelech, he had to fulfill the duty in regard to both the property and the posterity. Because of Boaz's wise, perhaps shrewd way of framing the occasion, this was the first time the nearer kinsman considered this, and it was a pretty big question to take in all at once. When it was just a matter of property, it was easy to decide on, but if he must take Ruth as a wife, that was another matter. I cannot redeem it for myself. Though it would be great to receive the property associated with Ruth, the nearer kinsman knew that taking her into his home and raising up her children would ruin his own inheritance. Probably the man had grown sons that had already received their inheritance of lands. The problem of dividing that inheritance among future children he would have with Ruth was more than he wanted to deal with. Also, no doubt the man was married and knew it would be awkward to bring home Ruth as wife number 2. You redeem my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. These were glorious words in the ears of Ruth and Naomi. A moment before, all seemed lost when the nearer kinsman had said, I will redeem it. But Boaz's plan had a surprise and unexpected wisdom to it, and it worked. Some might have thought Boaz's plan was foolish, to gain Ruth by offering her and her land to the nearer kinsman. How could that work? But the seemingly foolish plan did work. It was the custom in former times in Israel for the sandal. Deuteronomy 25, 5-10 describes the ceremony conducted when a kinsman declined his responsibility. The one declining removed a sandal, and the woman he declined to honor spat in his face. But in this case, because there was not a lack of honor involved, they just did the part of the ceremony involving the sandal. Buy it for yourself. The land is yours to redeem because you are also willing to redeem the posterity of Elimelech by taking Ruth as wife, something I am not willing to do. Boaz said to the elders and all the people. Boaz joyfully proclaimed, legally sealing the transaction, that he would redeem both the property and the posterity of Elimelech, and best of all, take Ruth, the woman he loved, as his wife. Ruth I have acquired as my wife. Back in chapter 1, Ruth seemed to be giving up on her best chance of marriage by leaving her native land of Moab and giving her heart and life to the God of Israel. But as Ruth put God first, he brought her together in a relationship greater than she could have imagined. Today, God will bless those wanting to get married in the same way, if they will only put him first. You are witnesses this day. This explains why a marriage ceremony is important and why it should be recognized by the civil authorities. Boaz had a love for Ruth that was public, a love that wanted to be publicly witnessed and registered. All the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. That you would be like Rachel and Leah. These two had 13 children between them and were the mothers of the whole nation of Israel. This was a big blessing to put on Boaz and Ruth. Like the house of Perez, what was so special about Perez? The story of his birth is in Genesis 38, 27-30. Trap on may your house be like the house of Perez, that breechmaker, as the midwife called him, because he would need be born before his brother, and carried away the first birthright, and afterwards became happy in a numerous and honorable posterity. I was thinking potentially it was because of Judah. Judah being an older man and him marrying Tamar could be why they were bringing this up to Boaz. Blessed be the Lord. Look at blessed Naomi. She now had a grandson. She was now famous in Israel, and she got to be a nurse to her own grandson, who has not left you this day without a close relative. It was fitting that these blessings in the life of Naomi be given so much attention at the end of the book. Naomi was the one whose original returning to the Lord began all this great work of God. If Naomi had not decided to go back to Bethlehem, the land of Israel, and the God of Israel, none of this would have happened. This is a marvelous demonstration of what God can do through one poor woman who gets right with him. It is also fitting, because Naomi was the one who said in chapter 1, "The Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. The Lord has brought me home again empty. The Lord has testified against me." If only Naomi could have seen how greatly the Lord would bless her at the end. We can't blame Naomi. We certainly do the same kind of thing. But we should also learn from what she learned. We should learn that God's plan is perfect and filled with love, and even when we can't figure out what he is doing, and it all seems so desperate, he still knows what he is doing. We should learn that all things work together for good, for those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose. There's a son born to Naomi. The son of Ruth and Boaz was named Obed. He had a son named Jesse. He had a son named David, and David had a descendant named Jesus. God's hand is all over history. God works out his purpose, generation after generation. Limited as we are to one lifetime, each of us sees so little of what happens. A genealogy is a striking way of bringing before us the continuity of God's purpose through the ages. The process of history is not haphazard. There is a purpose in it all, and the purpose is the purpose of God. The father of David, Naomi's return to Bethlehem, and the roots of David in Bethlehem, going back to Ruth and Boaz, are why Joseph and Mary had to go to Bethlehem to register in the census of Augustus. Ruth and Boaz are the reason why Jesus was born in Bethlehem. But the consideration of Jesus in this book of Ruth doesn't begin with a mention of King David. Jesus has been through the whole book, pictured by Boaz and the office of the kinsman redeemer. The kinsman redeemer had to be a family member. Jesus added humanity to his eternal deity so he could be our kinsman and save us. The kinsman redeemer had the duty of buying family members out of slavery. Jesus redeemed us from slavery to sin and death. The kinsman redeemer had the duty of buying back land that had been forfeited. Jesus will redeem the earth that mankind sold over to Satan. Boaz, as kinsman redeemer to Ruth, was not motivated by self-interest, but motivated by love for Ruth. Jesus' motivation for redeeming us is his great love for us. Boaz, as a kinsman redeemer to Ruth, had to have a plan to redeem Ruth unto himself, and some might have thought the plan to be foolish. Jesus has a plan to redeem us, and some might think the plan foolish, saving men by dying for them on a cruel cross. Yet the plan works and is glorious. Boaz, as kinsman redeemer to Ruth, took her as his bride. The people Jesus has redeemed are collectively called his bride. Boaz, as a kinsman redeemer to Ruth, provided a glorious destiny for Ruth. Jesus, as our redeemer, provides a glorious destiny for us. But it all comes back to the idea of Jesus as our kinsman redeemer. This is why he became a man. God might have sent an angel to save us, but the angel would not have been our kinsman. Jesus in his eternal glory, without the addition of humanity to his divine nature, might have saved us, but he would not have been our kinsman. A great prophet or priest would be our kinsman, but his own sin would have disqualified him as our redeemer. Only Jesus, the eternal God, who added humanity to his eternal deity, can be both the kinsman and the redeemer for mankind. From eternity, God planned to bring Ruth and Boaz together, and thus make Bethlehem his entrance point for the coming of Jesus as our true kinsman redeemer, fully God and fully man. Spiritually, we need to come to Bethlehem and let Jesus redeem us, as it was written in the Christmas hymn, O Little Town of Bethlehem. O little town of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie. Above thy deep and dreamless sleep the silent stars go by. Yet in thy dark streets shineth the everlasting light. The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight. How silently the wondrous gift is given. So God imparts to human hearts the blessings of his heaven. No ear may hear his coming, but in the world of sin, where meek souls will receive him still, the dear Christ enters in. O holy child of Bethlehem, descend to us, we pray. Cast out our sin and enter in, be born in us today. We hear the Christmas angels, the great glad tidings tell. O come to us, abide with us, our Lord, Emmanuel. Anyhow, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day.